being vulnerable, being open about this allows me to get creative on what I can do for you guys, what I can do to entertain you guys and deliver a better wrapped product.
You're listening to the Absolutely Cosmic Podcast.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Absolutely Cosmic Podcast, where we talk about anything self-improvement from the nerdy perspective. I'm your host, Joshua Salgado, and today we're talking all about conspiracy theories. And you're going to love this one because this has to do with the brand, and we're dropping some badass shit. I'm coming in hard, and we're going to drop some real deal stuff, not just any kind of stuff. We're going to drop a full-on graphic novel that plays into not only the designs and the head lore that goes into a lot of my mainstream designs, the logo of our brand, but also some real-world anthropological conspiracy theories and alien-type stuff that really get me going, that really interest me. One of the more recent ones that I saw when I started writing this graphic novel was Tartaria, the conspiracy theory of Tartaria. So Tartaria is almost like Atlantis. It's the lost civilization of Tartaria. It's this civilization that does have historical evidence, but it seems to be that it has been wiped away from the world history. And I thought that was so interesting, the idea that a whole civilization, a whole creed of people could disappear without a trace, almost like Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? Like there's no recollection in human history, and there is some points in history where in like the books and the texts and history and murals and things and art that was written in literature that it was referenced, but it no longer exists. Same thing with Atlantis, the idea of a civilization that fell, and we don't know why it fell, is really interesting to me. Now, I took the element of a fallen civilization, so I have a whole planet based on Tartaria, and it's literally called Tartaria. Now, the real-world implication of Tartaria, I've heard recently that the Great Wall of China was actually to defend against the civilization of Tartaria back in the day. Because the way that China, the wall, so the holes that the archers of the Great Wall of China, of ancient Chinese, armies, right? They would be shooting would be away from where you would think to defend China, right? It'd be the opposite side. So they believed that Tartaria was attacking from that side. Now, I'm not too well versed in ancient Chinese history, but I guess have heard some stories about that and stuff like that. And I thought that was really interesting based off a few like clips and Joe Rogan type clips in the podcast. And I thought, why not implement it into a story? Like, I feel like no one ever uses conspiracy theories in stories. So I wrote not only that, right? Not only Tartaria literally being a planet, it's essentially a lost civilization. There's another one based on the American World Expos, but I think this is more realistic with Europe. So have you noticed that recently in Europe, it seems to be that the more that they uncover of these ancient not archaeological, but architectures, right? These ancient cities and stuff, there's like catacombs and other buildings underneath what we have of modern Europe, and modern Europe isn't that modern. So how is that possible? My theory is that just, human history, right? As an anthropology minor, right? I learned that a lot of early human cities and civilizations, they built structures on top of each other. So I think it's almost ingrained in how we operate to do that. So I kind of implemented that into Tartaria and then that first story that we see, right? And I think it's a kick-ass one. I also implemented World War II history, right? With a character. So the freedom fighters in World War II, right? Were actually the first freedom fighters of Germany were actually the Danish freedom fighters, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty damn sure they were one of the first, if not the first, freedom fighters that fought against the Germans. And to me, I thought that was so interesting that in an era where the United States did not want to get involved with Europe right away until Pearl Harbor, right? And Europe was under attack. the Jews were being prosecuted. And so the Danish freedom fighters were the response to that. And they were a few strong people that went in there and defended the Jews from being a genocide happening. And I thought that was really interesting. And I remember in middle school, we learned a lot about the Danish freedom fighters early on when we studied the Holocaust. And I don't know, whenever anybody mentions the Holocaust, that is what comes to mind is the Danish freedom fighters, the first really courageous people to stand up against a tyrannical, evil, ideology and an evil, essentially at that time, government, right? And I thought that was so interesting. So I brought that I guess world history into my story with the freedom fighters in my story, right? Because there is an element in that early story, because this graphic novel is going to be an ongoing thing. So where we see Tartaria right now is not where it's going to be at the end of the story, and not where it was before. Now that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing. Additionally, one of the biggest things I thought I've never seen in a science fiction film is Neanderthals. And I'm giggling because, like, how many times have you seen Neanderthals represented as these dumb idiots on the caveman? And people say, oh, we came from Neanderthals. Well, first of all, you're dumb. My English teacher said that. And I told her, I said, actually, we did not evolve from Neanderthals. Neanderthals were a cousin species. Think of like, you have different species of any animal, right? You have offshoots and side shoots, essentially, with different variations. They were just a variation of human. And their brain size was actually relatively large for the evolutionary timescale. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, here's the thing is I'm a Catholic man. So when I talk about evolution, I have my personal beliefs on evolution and the human evolution. And I'm not saying I believe that, like, we solely came from evolution and everything's an accident. But I do believe that evolution happened in some scale, right? And I think there's no way to prove or deny it. You're going to say, well, yeah, there's a way to prove, whatever. This is not that type of debate. But at its core, what I'm trying to get at right now is that Neanderthals are really, really interesting because most people don't realize, first of all, they think they're in our direct lineage as an ancestor. They are not. Second of all, when they started to go extinct, my personal opinion is they didn't go extinct. They just intermingled with us and mixed with us, which gave humans and Neanderthals stronger DNA because it had a biodiversity. And so not only the fact that they actually lived on, right? And actually current populations of Northern and ethnic Europe has about 2 to 3% of Neanderthal DNA, and that's proposed why there's so many individuals who are adaptable to cold. That's a potential trait that we gained into our DNA, into our human experience, I guess. But also, there's a lot of diseases that people are prone to that are actually linked to specific genomes that came from Neanderthals. I believe it's like heart disease and diabetes and some weird stuff like that, which I don't really understand. And I don't think anybody really understands it yet. But the biggest thing that interests me about Neanderthals, more than anything else, is that Neanderthals were actually the first human species to have art and to show family unit culture. So we're going to go into the art side. So if you go to Shanidar Cave, right, and we're going to reference Shanidar Cave in Iraq, as well as Shanidar 1, right? Shanidar 1 was a set of remains found of an older individual, and we'll get into that shortly, why that's so expensive. Why that shows. We're going to get into later why that's so important. But Shanidar 1 was an individual. He was an individual, right? Shanidar Cave in Iraq was a site found. Now, they found some of the earliest human art with what I believe is called ochre, which is kind of like a dye-type substance, on the walls, cave paintings, urn paintings, and things like that, and vase paintings, and it seemed like it was a marking type thing. It was a way to tell story or some kind of, like, we don't really know. That's the thing, and that's the cool thing about it, is nobody really knows what it was. The cave paintings are pretty obvious. It's probably some sort of either the hunt or a ritual or a mixture of both or some sort of early spirituality of humanity. But even then, you can't tie it to that. It's probably more of, giant animal, we hunt. And I'm not saying that to downgrade on what they're doing. It's just there's no way to tell what that stuff means. It's just an interpretation from science and history and archaeology. And I think it's very accurate. But again, there's no way to tell like the perfect day-to-day. There's a very, very large, my personal opinion, very, very large sway of what it could be, a large margin of what it could be. But Neanderthals, because this was a Neanderthal site, a Neanderthal tribe, if you will, or mostly Neanderthal. Neanderthals had the first human art. So they were known for art. That was what they invented it. Not only that, they were known for the first people to have human rituals. And what do I mean? They cared for their old and disabled. Because Shanidar 1, the remains of Shanidar 1, was an individual who had a blind left eye. I believe his left arm was broken, or it was actually amputated, and damaged. His hip and his knee were damaged. And so he wouldn't have been able to survive a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, let alone, people today who are amputees and who have disabilities struggle to survive in today's society, let alone somebody or let alone a individual who had to hunt to survive. I believe he couldn't chew either. I forget, was he missing teeth or something like that? I don't mean to laugh, but I believe he couldn't chew. Maybe it was a broken jaw. And what's so interesting about this is that means that someone had to care for him. Someone had to bring him food, potentially chew the food for him. If he was blind, probably help him around. And that's proof because he lived, I believe, into his 60s or the older age, right? The older age for that time frame. And I'm no anthropology expert, but I took to this story really well. It was very heartwarming. And I was like, Neanderthals to me always seemed dumb. They just seemed as these brute-like apes. But they're not. What's interesting is they have much more dense bone and muscle, and they're very stout. They're very stocky build. And their technique, and this is probably why they didn't survive very long in terms of humanity, early humanity, was that because they were so stocky, they were well adept for the cold. So they survived in the northern regions of the world. So that's why you see a lot of them surviving up north more, right? That's why I think you see it in like the northern European population still has that 2 to 3% because they probably outlasted up there. But they were they very focused on packed type attacks, type hunting. So they would fight large livestock, large animals, and defend against large animals in groups up close and personal. It wasn't very strategic from what it seems, right? I don't know if they had access to atlatls, which were it was a cross between a spear and a bow, and it had a little like launcher and you would throw it kind of thing. I don't know if they were using that. That's something to be really interesting to research. But in a long-term scale, they would fight up close and they would get injured. And most of the remains found to have stress fractures and damage to the joints, indicating that they had a very rough physical lifestyle, which probably attributed to them eventually assimilating into our population and kind of dying out. And why is this so important? Well, one, because I find it phenomenally interesting that the predisposed ideology, right, of Neanderthals is that they're these dumb apes that we came from. And it's like, no, that's completely farce. In fact, they were probably one of the most intelligent species for their time of human, and they were more intelligent than us at that point. And here's the thing is they had an early human heart, but they still had a smaller brain volume than us, Homo erectus. So it doesn't, so brain volume doesn't necessarily correlate with intelligence. So what we believe is accurate is not really true. And that's why when I was getting at earlier about the cave paintings and no one really knowing the specifics about human history, we don't know. Essentially, think about having a few dots and we have to connect it with what we think. But we don't know the day-to-day life. We don't know the culture. We can say biologically that their remains had this because we see it in multiple individuals. But we don't know truly what happened. What were these species like? So I thought that was really interesting. And then going back to the movie side, I've never seen a Neanderthal displayed. Wow, I sound Neanderthal displayed in media as an intelligent, capable species. And so I am going to do that and be the first to ever create any form of media, which will be the graphic novel, where these Neanderthals are actually something different than what we think the majority thinks. And it's not some social justice thing. I just think it's interesting, and it's backed up with the truth of humanity. Oh, not to mention at Shanidar 1, there was a burial site with a female Homo erectus human and a Neanderthal together, indicating that they probably were married or together at some point, or some sort of like coexistence, maybe in a relationship type thing, I'm saying. And I'm just kidding, but yeah. So they were together. And that's another thing. So they were very complex for the time on the evolutionary scale of what we understand right now, at least. So yeah, that's something that I really, really want to dive deep into in my story. Is on this planet, there's Neanderthals, and they're actually maybe seen as these dumb idiot brutes, these wild men that live in a tribe, but they're actually highly intelligent. And maybe Shanidar 1, the remains, that individual will see life in my universe in maybe a different way, a little bit different, and characterizing him, obviously. But I want to bring that individual to life. So that is the conspiracy theory, right? Why am I bringing these anthropology and conspiracy theories, right? You have the World Expo talking about how we build on top of cities over and over and bury the old ones. That's going to be a player in Tartaria, and how kind of the day, how we save the day, right? Might be part of that. I don't know. Why am I doing this, right? One, because I find conspiracy theories highly interesting. I've noticed too that 99% of the people find conspiracy theories phenomenally interesting. And I'm not talking about the crazy person who thinks that like humans are cannibals or some weird shit, or like we are aliens, or there's always these wacky, super wild conspiracy theories that may or may not be true, but they're most likely not true. But they're fun to think about, or creepy to think about. But in reality, I think most people find the pyramids and ancient human history extremely, extremely interesting, because we don't truly understand our history. We act like we do, but we don't truly understand human history. And I don't think we ever, ever will. And that's the beauty of it, is that 1,000 years in the future, people are going to be wondering what we did in 2000 to 2024, or that whatever range, right? People are going to be wondering, because all this technology degrades. That's another conspiracy theory, that maybe there was advanced civilizations with cameras and phones and this and that, but they got degraded over the years, right? Because if you ever notice, like a phone, if you were to like put it on the beach or in dirt, it breaks down pretty fucking quick. Excuse my language, but it's the truth. And to me, I find that interesting, that maybe we had an advanced society. Maybe. All these different little thought experiments, if you will, all these ways of thinking, I find phenomenal. So by putting some of those, or at least hints of those, in my graphic novel, what I think is interesting, and tie that with a really cool story, and tie that with the idea of anti-wokeness. Now, I'm not going out of my way to be overly conservative with my story, but I'm fucking tired of Star Wars and Marvel catering to the few that scream like banshees because they want, the alphabet club, and they want, and I'm saying these things not to infuriate anybody, but I'm just frustrated with over wokeness and over like catering to social justice bullshit, rather than catering to the source material and to the people that created it and to the people that are fans of it, and actually doing it justice and bringing it to light cool stories. At the end of the day, I watch movies, I watch media, I read books because I want a cool fucking story. I don't give a shit about anything else. I want to escape the world's already filled with madness. So that's part of why I'm writing the graphic novels. I just want to create a kick-ass story. If you look at the old Westerns, those were fucking badass. How I think it's the Tales of Josie Wales with Clint Eastwood. Fucking one of the coolest Western movies. And then that point where he goes up to the Native American and makes peace with, I think it's the Comanches, and those guys are known for like destroying people. Like, they were brutal. And he makes peace with this tribe, this leader of the Comanches, who basically wanted to kill him, but Clint Eastwood like kind of reasoned, he's like, it's not us who are the bad guys, like let's team up together. And he respected that as a man. Shit, you know. And so we have so many great American stories, and it feels like, one, we're catering to the wokeness, but two, we're catering to the formulas that do overly well in I guess in theaters and in novels and in this and that, the tropes. We're constantly getting these same tropes. Star Wars. That's why I like science fiction, but that's kind of why it's more sci-fi fantasy for me. The graphic novels coming out to be more sci-fi fantasy is because I grew up on Star Wars. When I was a young kid and going through my parents' divorce, Star Wars was something that I latched onto. I was like probably, like 9. So I was a little bit older, so I could understand it for the most part. Well, I could understand it, but I guess like if you get into the super political and like the lore heavy stuff, I just was like, oh yeah, like I got it, but it wasn't super in depth. Whereas people nowadays are super like, yeah, this is like this, the Senate and this, and it's kind of relating to like the Vietnam War. Like I never really picked that up. I just thought, oh shit, the government's like spoiler alert, the emperor turns evil. And so I latched on to Star Wars as a kid and a preteen very heavily. I was always into comic books. I'm a super nerd. Like I was into Pokemon and all that shit. And I'm not very outward about that. I more or less latched on to the story. I mean, I love the lore and the designs and just the artwork, but I latched on to the storytelling elements and how it made me feel as a kid. And so I want to replicate that. And I want to kind of, hopefully my goal, maybe this is an ambitious and kind of arrogant goal, but I want to be able to hopefully start a wave to bring that back into the American movie and media culture and storytelling culture when it comes to fiction and science fiction and comic book stories. I want to, and it's probably already being done in the independent world, so maybe I'm not new to I don't think I'm new to anything, but I just want to contribute to that part of the American culture and media. And interlace these conspiracy theories that are phenomenally interesting. Pyramids in space, aliens, right? What about aliens, right? I mean, the whole world is a sci-fi fantasy, so you're going to see a lot of different aliens. One of the aliens, she's a female freedom fighter, and I won't give it away too much, but I kind of want to design her in the idea of, I don't think it's Bob Lazar. It's another individual who talked a lot heavily about aliens and worked high up in the government. We talk about the Nordic blondes, which are very tall, skinny, essentially humans, but they're blonde, blue eyes, like they're just the Nordic blondes. They're like humanoid, but they're not human, they're not us. They're taller and they just have a little bit less, the proportions are different from what I watched in those documentaries and Joe Rogan podcast. And one of the characters has kind of got design elements from that. I want to pull from, successful things, successful IPs in certain ways, the story elements that I like, the character elements that I like, I want to pull bits and pieces and then use that to tell my story. Everything that's made artwork-wise is just a remix. It's just a retelling of a different story. There's been, I keep saying, there's been a recent uplash because people are realizing now that Dune was the original sci-fi, type of IP, and Star Wars ripped a lot of stuff off. And when you look into it, it's like, well, yeah, obviously, like everyone's ripping off Shakespeare. I mean, not the MCU bullshit, but like there's a lot of influence in movies from Shakespearean, from the Renaissance era, from the medieval era, a lot of things. And it's not just like, a movie about knights. Like it's story elements. Coming of age was a very medieval ideology. I mean, it was a little bit different, right? Romance in the Shakespearean sense. Medieval romance in the sense of medieval was very, very different. It was about a hero. It was about a young nobleman or a young kid who was not noble, but and there's these tropes and stuff that we follow that are good, right? That are good storytelling, and we're moving away from that. And I think with Dune, I haven't seen it yet. I'm reading the books right now, but moving back into that is very important. I genuinely think that it's very, 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 very important. So what do I plan with this graphic novel? Why am I talking about it so much? I'm excited because, first of all, I have always dreamed of creating a story that I could tell to people, right? I still do have a very strong imagination, and even making these t-shirts does not quench the thirst, because there is head lore and there is like a story behind each t-shirt. But I want to tell that story like in a real way, like in a legitimate way that's coherent and creates characters and builds something. And when I die, right, I want to leave something behind that's more than just a small business. I want to leave behind a world, right? I want to leave behind my perspective on creativity, my perspective on writing things, my perspective on creating a story, my perspective on life through the lens of my imagination and creativity. That's what I essentially want to leave behind when I die. And I want to be able to tell my personal opinions on society in a way, or what I see happening, or my experiences through deployments and being a serviceman, being a loadmaster, through a story, right? And not make it some woke bullshit, not make it some overly conservative bullshit either. Like, just make it real, make it human. One of the biggest elements that we're seeing in these science fiction and these comic book stories is that Spider-Man is the superpower. Superman is the superpower. Superman is no longer Clark Kent. He doesn't have human struggles. Spider-Man is no longer Peter Parker. He doesn't have real human struggles. There's no weight to his struggles. I mean, with No Way Home, again, if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, but there is a big struggle and a big, I guess, weight, right? Moral weight that happens. But other than that, there's nothing. There's the MCU is just churning and burning cool designs, essentially, and making it a Super Smash Bros. Movie. Meaning, like, it's a Mortal Kombat movie in Marvel skin. Like, it's just fighting and things blowing up. There's no substance to it. When people die, it doesn't care. The only two people that really mattered was in No Way Home, and I think No Way Home's, even though it's a few years old already, I think it's too new to talk about it like that. But then with Iron Man on Endgame dying, I think those are the two that mattered. No one else, like, I can care less. I don't even know who the new Avengers are. And we're catering to a lot of people to make it woke. People, they're just making movies just to make money, to make merchandise. And I'm sick of it, so I'm just going to make my own thing based on the designs in the world that I've already pretty much built. I just haven't shared it with the real world, you know? And I'm just frustrated. And this is first world problems. Like, I don't necessarily think that this is necessarily worth arguing over with someone else, but I think voicing my opinion. And here's the thing is I'm not just complaining on the internet. I'm going to do something about it and actually contribute to hopefully changing a culture, right? That's the goal, is we're going to change culture. Like, Cosmic Absolute Tales of the Galactic Wanderer, which is what I think it's going to be named right now, is going to be a cultural sensation. Like, there's no doubt about it. I will keep working it until. And also, again, going back to the conspiracy theories, you know, bringing in some of those that are fun to think about, that are interesting, that get you thought-provoking, right? Because someone's going to read my story and they're going to be like, oh, I watched a Joe Rogan podcast about Tartaria. The guest was talking about Tartaria. Oh, I listened to that documentary about you know, that we might be building over old cities on top of them. What about caves? I haven't really implemented that into the story, but maybe we will. Maybe we'll visit a planet that's just a cave planet. And you know, Sasquatch. I have a story for that. Once I finish the Tales of the Galactic Wanderer and get to a point where it's this graphic novel is published, I'm going to start working on another idea that I've had for years that I didn't write because I wanted it to be a movie, but it's going to have Sasquatch. And it's not just going to be this, and it's going to be a horror movie, but it's not going to be what you think. And it's going to really play on characters and, I don't know, I've read things like the Epic of Gilgamesh and parts of the Iliad and Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare. And I'm reading Dune now, and I just love literature. It doesn't seem like I don't read like consecutively. Like, I'm not super consistent. I'll just get in a mood to read, and when I have free time, especially on the plane when I'm flying at TDY, I'll just pick up a book and read it. Like, and that's kind of where I knock things out, because it's like there's not much else to do. And again, the past few years I haven't been super interested in film, so like watching movies. So I've stuck to reading, and that's why I've read a lot of I re-listened to a lot of Shakespeare. Much Ado About Nothing. That's freaking hilarious. Shakespeare play. Titus Andronicus. That's a very dark Shakespeare play, but it's so dark it's almost funny. It's kind of like Monty Python kind of feels like sometimes, where you're just like so dark, you're like, really, man? Like, Shakespeare, you can come up, and it's proposed that it was just early in his career that he wrote that, so he didn't really have as much knowledge in how far to go with these dark elements. And so I genuinely care about storytelling in that, I guess, formal setting, and I want to contribute. I just genuinely want to contribute. And the thing is this, I want it to be a free digital download for everybody. Like, I want everybody to have access to it in some shape or form. Like, there will be physical copies. There will be a way. If you want to purchase a physical copy, we will find a way to make that happen. But I want it to be a digital release available on the website. Like, you just go there and download it. You just go there and get it through Amazon for free. And that's the goal, because then at least someone can read it without having, like, I don't know, I'm just thinking about, like, what about the person who, the loadmaster who's deployed, who likes comic books, and, Amazon's not going to get to them, so they only have the internet, and they don't know what's good, so, like, they want to read some independent comic books, they don't know, they want to try a different comic, maybe they stumble across mine and see it's free and give it a shot, that's how I think. Like, I'm just thinking a deployed individual or a kid or somebody. I mean, it's not necessarily geared towards a younger audience. I think there's a lot of elements that are a little dark. And again, like Neanderthals, I find that fucking phenomenally interesting. And I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I find Neanderthals very, very interesting. I find human anthropology and early human history so fascinating. Like rock tools are fascinating. And again, I haven't seen it done in modern media, in modern movies. Like, Neanderthals are seen as idiots. Neanderthals are seen as, and then you have things like Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian is this interesting character of a barbarian, and I haven't read the comics, but Frank Frazetta is a phenomenal artist, right? I think he has what's the other character he has? It's the Death Dealer. That's another cool, like, barbarian-esque, and that's a little bit later in human history, but people love ancient human history brought to the comics. I don't know why. I think it's just because it's more brutal, and I want to see that. Another element is AI, because AI is something that is extremely relevant in today, and again, conspiracy theories running around the world. People have a lot of fears of it, and again, one of my favorite films of all time is Terminator 2 Judgment Day by James Cameron. I just think that it is such a good piece of film, and it's a lot more in depth than you think, especially nowadays with AI and the implications. No one thought that computers would ever get smart enough to be able to code themselves new extensions and plugins to be able to work better for what you ask it, to self-improve so that it could operate for you better. And AI is just advancing within month after month after month. Things are getting better. Things are coming out. It's just like scary. So I wanted to play on that and my ideas on what could potentially happen to a nation very similar to us, or a planet very similar to us, if AI were to take over with the current state of our government, I guess, or culture or society. We're giving away a lot of our freedoms in the hopes that the government will take care of us well. And I'm not going to get into if that's good or bad. I personally don't think that's necessarily the smartest thing to do, right? I think there should be always a separation of citizen and government, right? The citizen should have the ability to audit and control the government. And what happens when AI is put into the mix, right? What happens when AI becomes the government? What happens when AI deems that we're too dangerous? Us humans, I keep saying humans, but us citizens are too dangerous. And I'm not talking about just America. I'm talking about Tartaria, the planet of Tartaria. What happens when AI realizes that we cannot be trusted to police ourselves. We cannot be trusted to teach ourselves. So then they start stepping in, and they realize that people don't like that. So then where do they go? They go into stronger and stricter means to try to control. And so we're going to see a little bit about that in the post situation of that. But I do have some stories in the works for, I guess, some ideas. I haven't written it because I'm still playing with how that plays into this current story. But how did this all start, right? How did this all start on Tartaria where AI took over? Why did it happen? Why was Tartaria falling? Why was it the fall of Rome? What was it focusing on? Why was Tartaria losing its just monumental stature in the galaxy as a superpower? It was losing its ability for trade and inventing and producing and manufacturing and having a strong military. Why was that? And I want to explore that because there's a lot of feelings of that in America today. And people are very scared where America is going. And people are very scared of where AI is going in America. So I want to just explain what I think is a potential that can happen because of what we see right now happening. And again, I want to dive into that through the lens of science fiction fantasy because I love that, and I can imagine a world where aliens exist and creatures exist and Neanderthals exist, and they're actually smart, that are actually strong, that are actually cool and interesting and multifaceted. You know, I can imagine a character that can travel the galaxy solving a problem greater than just one nation or one civilization and helping people. But he's really not trying to help people necessarily. Maybe he's just trying to help himself because he's lost his way as a human being. And that I put part of myself in that character because, again, when I came back from deployment, I lost myself in a way. I think I left myself in Djibouti. I believe that I left who I was or who I became in Djibouti and couldn't find it because it was over there. And I had to become anew. But that wasn't the truth. It was just that I lost my way for a little bit and let the mental health, kind of that battle happen. And one of the biggest things that I struggled with was helping or being there for others, even if it was more than I should or could be emotionally, right? In my personal relationships. And I want to put that into a character, but in a less dark or intense way. Because, again, I'm not trying to put myself into a character. I just want to explore an idea, right? What happens when a character who thought he was doing great for the world and he was helping the world loses everything that he was fighting for? A character that loses everything that kept him going. Just for what? What does he fight for after that? And his fall, maybe his darkness, his ability going down, right? Because he doesn't have a purpose anymore. Why is he going to be? Because this character might or may not be a super soldier type, special operator type guy with cybernetic enhancements as well as some biological augmentations. And what happens when this guy who was saving the world as essentially like a Captain America type or a Master Chief type with his unit fighting in the war and loses everything that he cares about? What happens then? Where does he go? And this is going to be explored throughout the whole anthology of Tales of the Galactic Wanderer, as well as the idea of saving the universe. And is he really trying to save the universe for selfish means? To stop the nightmares of the Ancient Ones, which is a reference to the Nephilim in the Book of Enoch. Again, it's not biblical in the story. Like, I'm not going to make it obviously overtly biblical, but I find certain elements of a lot of these weird taboo topics type quite interesting. And is him trying to solve some of these planets' problems just him trying to stop these night terrors and these visions that he keeps having and to stop being haunted by his past? Or is it him actually trying to help people and bring peace to the galaxy, like Luke Skywalker? I'm just kidding, but you catch my drift. That's part of the element, and I think there's going to be a lot of side stories. I've introduced like 3 different factions. Yeah, 3 minimum factions, but there's like sub-factions, I guess, that I could explore and go down just on the planet of Tartaria. And so I'm kind of rambling at this point, but implementing everything into the story that I'm building, and I hope it's received well. I genuinely do, because I am putting a lot of work into this, and I have an illustrator whose art is phenomenal. And I really hope that this is something that we can do, and I really want this to be the thing that drives Cosmic Absolute into the future in our world, right, as a brand, and really give hope that people, you can come from any walk of life, any mindset, you come from your darkest day, and there's hope to build yourself back up, and I want to be able to cause some thought about where we are societally. And I don't want it to just be a left or a right thing. I want it to be just like, well, is this true? Is this not true? Like, I want to evoke thought. I want to evoke that feeling of, something feels similar. And they can start thinking about it and putting it deeper, not putting so much, I guess, politics, not in the term of like presidents and bullshit, but like just being overly thematical. Yeah, and again, it's also a way for me to express how I viewed certain parts of Djibouti, especially that first planet, and understanding how corruption and evil can destroy a civilization, can destroy a country, turn it to a third world country. And obviously, what we see in the graphic novel is probably much, much more exaggerated for the sake of story. But, and yeah, this is something that I'm really passionate about. And I'm really bringing some of these conspiracy theories, if you will, or anthropological ideas to it, because I'm just innately interested in them. And I think you could put some of these into a science fiction world and expand upon certain characters within these factions or things or ideas, right? And build something or create elements right there that are in our world, right? We just don't understand it. Humans are complex. Humans are weird. Civilization is weird. The fact that we think we have to build giant fucking concrete buildings to live and work in, when most of our early human history, or some of, certain people in our early human history just lived in huts and were nomads. And so I just want to explore some of these ideas in what ways I can with what knowledge I have, and my personal experiences of life. And it's always been kind of a dream to have a movie made, and I think this might be a first step to get that to happen. And again, I don't know how hard it's going to be to do this, but we're going to make it happen, guys. So I want to thank you guys for listening to me rambling. This doesn't really have a clear, concise episode. This is very, very, very free thought, because I think sometimes you just got to have it free thought, me rambling to a camera. If you guys do like the new camera setup, though, I have an ND, going on another tangent. I have an ND filter. I have my Shure microphone, my SM7X, I believe. I have some ambient lighting in the background showcasing my fucking badass tarantula, this salt lamp the girlfriend got for me, as well as an Aircrew Environmental Respiratory Protection mask. I didn't wear that one, but I've worn that piece of equipment for training. I didn't wear that specific one, but I've worn it before, so I figured it'd be really cool to have one. It kind of looks kind of creepy, like a seance thing. It is not. It is literally just a gas mask, a Gucci gas mask from the 1960s. But if you guys do kind of like the setup, like that more cinematic tone, I'm also working on color grading as more as audio work to kind of really bring to life a cinematic element to the story of the podcast. I really like it because here's the thing. Okay, I'm going to go on one more tangent. I don't have the facilities right now to have an in-person podcast. I'm very vulnerable about what we don't have at Cosmic Absolute and where we are in my mindset, because I think I've talked about this on live a few times, but like we don't see that in celebrities and high up people and people who build these personal brands influencing. They're just so methodical. There's no realness anymore, honestly. Like the truth is that right now Cosmic Absolute does not have the facilities for a large podcast setting. Really, it's just one camera guy, one podcaster. We have the co-host who's also another excellent podcaster. And we do have some opportunities to do some cool in-person podcasts, but it's not my studio. And, being vulnerable, being open about this allows me to get creative on what I can do for you guys, what I can do to entertain you guys and deliver a better wrapped product. And in doing so, I've gotten an ND filter to kind of almost do a baseline color grading. I've gotten my lighting set up much better. I'm just doing things that I can do to improve the quality in which you guys receive the podcast at. Because it is remote, there is things I can do, and I do really enjoy this setup now. Honestly, I really fucking think this looks I really enjoy how this footage is coming out so far. And anyone who says anything else, I'm going to fight them. But again, I'll stop rambling because we're already at 46 minutes, and this podcast is kind of just, I don't know, the random.
Thank you for listening. Consider absolutely smashing the subscribe button for more content like this.